The sun was just dipping below the horizon when we arrived at the beach, casting an orange glow over the sand. I was with my best friends Tom, Alex, and Matt, ready for an epic weekend. We set up our tents and got a fire going, the crackling flames adding a cozy touch to the cool evening air. We were sitting around the campfire, sharing ghost stories and laughing, when Tom brought up the local legend. "They say this beach is cursed," he said, his voice low and spooky. "People come here and never leave." We all laughed it off, but there was something about the way the wind howled through the cliffs that made me uneasy. I brushed it off and focused on the fire, but the feeling lingered. As the night wore on, strange things started to happen. We noticed a figure standing on the cliffs, just watching us. "Who's that?" Matt asked, squinting into the darkness. The figure didn't move, just stood there, a dark silhouette against the night sky. "Probably just another camper," I said, trying to sound confident. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Later, as we were getting ready to turn in, we realized some of our food was missing. "I swear I packed more than this," Alex said, rummaging through the cooler. "Maybe an animal got to it," Tom suggested, but none of us had heard any animals. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps around our tents. I held my breath, listening. The steps were slow, deliberate. I glanced at my phone, no signal. I nudged Tom awake and whispered what I heard. He listened for a moment, then grabbed a flashlight. We unzipped the tent and shone the light outside, but saw nothing. Just the waves crashing against the shore and the wind rustling the trees. The next morning, we found one of the tents collapsed, its poles snapped. "What the hell?" Matt exclaimed. "Did a storm roll through?" "No storm," I said, looking around. "Something did this." We decided to explore the area, hoping to find some answers. Tom and I stumbled upon an old, abandoned lifeguard tower. Inside, we found blood-stained clothes and messages carved into the wood. "Help me," one read. "He watches," said another. "This is seriously messed up," Tom muttered, his face pale. I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. That night, things got worse. We saw the figure again, closer this time. He was dirty, his clothes torn, and he was muttering to himself. "We need to confront him," Alex said, but when we got close, he vanished into the shadows. With no signal and our flashlight dead, panic started to set in. Alex went to look for the man alone and didn't come back for hours. When he did, he was shaking, covered in cuts and bruises. "I got lost," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw things, horrible things." We found a hidden cave the next day, covered in strange markings. Inside were belongings of past campers, as if they had just vanished. There was also a journal, detailing the man's descent into madness. He believed he was protecting the beach from intruders. That night, the man stepped up his game. He disturbed our camp, left threatening messages, and even set traps around our site. We found dead animals placed around as warnings. "We need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. We tried to start the car, but it was dead. The keys were missing, and the tires were slashed. "We're trapped," Matt said, his face ashen. Desperate, we decided to hike back to the nearest town. But the paths seemed to change, leading us in circles. The man was always just behind us, setting traps that injured Matt. His taunting voice echoed through the trees, driving us to the cliffs. In a final confrontation, we managed to lead him into one of his own traps. With him temporarily out of the way, we made a break for safety and reached a ranger station. It was abandoned, signs of a struggle everywhere. We found a radio and called for help. Authorities arrived, but the man was gone, leaving only his deranged writings and evidence of his obsession with the beach. We were safe, but the experience left us all shaken. We vowed never to return to that beach. The beauty of the place was forever tainted by the horrors we faced. I often reflect on what happened, haunted by the knowledge that the man is still out there, watching, waiting for his next victims. As we drove away, I glanced back at the cliffs and saw a dark figure watching us. A chill ran down my spine. The beach remains beautiful and dangerous, its dark secrets lurking just beneath the waves. The sun was setting as I caught the last wave of the day. The water was perfect, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. As I paddled back to shore, I saw someone standing at the edge of the beach, just beyond the breaking waves. The figure was motionless, staring directly at me. It gave me the chills. I shrugged it off and decided it was time to head home. I dragged my board across the sand and started packing up my things. The sky was getting darker, and the once warm breeze had turned cold. I reached for my phone to check the time, but there was no signal. Weird, I thought. This spot usually had good reception. As I was about to leave, I noticed a trail of footprints leading from the water to where the figure had been standing. But now, there was no one there. The footprints seemed fresh, still slightly wet. A shiver ran down my spine. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just someone messing around. I started walking towards the parking lot, carrying my board under my arm. The wind picked up, and I swear I could hear faint whispers carried along with it. I quickened my pace, glancing back every few steps, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Just the empty beach, slowly fading into darkness. The path to the parking lot felt longer than usual. Every rustle of the leaves, every distant sound made my heart race. When I finally saw my car, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. That relief was short-lived. As I got closer, I saw that my car had a flat tire. Great, just what I needed, I muttered to myself. I bent down to inspect the tire, and that's when I heard it, footsteps behind me. I shot up and turned around, but there was no one there. The beach was empty. My mind must be playing tricks on me, I thought. I took a deep breath and started to change the tire, my hands shaking slightly. That's when I noticed something even more disturbing. There were fresh scratches on the undercarriage of my car. Deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there before. My pulse quickened, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead. I worked faster, glancing around every few seconds. Just as I finished, I heard the footsteps again, closer this time. I stood up, my flashlight flickering in the darkness. The figure from the beach was back, standing at the edge of the parking lot, barely visible in the dim light. They were closer now, and I could make out their face, pale and emotionless. I grabbed my keys and jumped into my car, slamming the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I hit the gas, but the car didn't move. I looked down and saw that my car was stuck, the tires spinning uselessly in the sand. Panic set in. I threw open the door and ran back towards the beach, towards the old lifeguard station. The figure was following me, their footsteps quickening to match my pace. I could feel their eyes on me, and every hair on my body stood on end. I reached the lifeguard station and burst inside, slamming the door behind me. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. The station was dark and smelled of salt and decay. I looked around for something, anything, to defend myself with. My hand landed on a rusted metal rod, and I gripped it tightly. Through the dirty windows, I could see the figure searching for me, methodically looking around the beach. I tried to stay silent, but my heavy breathing seemed deafening in the small space. As I backed away from the door, my foot kicked something. I looked down and saw old, dried blood stains and torn clothing. My stomach turned. The whispers were louder now, almost like a low hum. I could hear faint, eerie laughter surrounding the station. I pressed my back against the wall, praying they wouldn't find me. But the door began to shake, the flimsy wood splintering under the pressure. I braced myself, the rod held high, ready to strike. Just as the door was about to give way, bright headlights flooded the beach. The figure stopped, turning towards the lights, and then vanished into the darkness. I dropped the rod and stumbled out of the station, waving frantically at the approaching car. It was a group of local fishermen, their faces etched with concern. They helped me into their car, and as we drove away, they warned me about the beach at night. I looked back one last time at the deserted beach, the memory of the night etched into my mind. I vowed never to return. As we sped away, I noticed a piece of my surfboard in the back seat, now broken and twisted. The beach had taken something from me, and I knew it would haunt me forever. It all started the moment we set foot on that beach. The first thing I noticed was the man standing on the dunes, staring at us with an unsettling intensity. He was gaunt, his clothes tattered, and his eyes seemed to pierce right through me. I tried to shake it off, thinking he was just a drifter or someone curious about new faces. My wife and I had rented a beach house for the weekend, hoping to escape the city and reconnect. The house was beautiful, right on the edge of a secluded stretch of sand, with no neighbors in sight. It should have been perfect, but from the moment we arrived, I felt a gnawing sense of unease. We spent the day trying to enjoy the beach, but I couldn't stop feeling like we were being watched. Every time I glanced at the dunes, the man was there, always in a different spot, yet always staring. I approached him once, intending to ask what he wanted, but he disappeared behind the dunes before I could reach him. It was as if he was playing a game, one where the rules were known only to him. As the sun began to set, we decided to head back to the house. That's when things started getting really strange. We heard footsteps on the sand outside, but every time I looked, no one was there. The sound of whispers carried by the wind, faint but unmistakable, set my nerves on edge. We found odd things around the house too. Footprints circled the windows, a dead fish was left on the doorstep, and someone had drawn a crude symbol in the sand near the house. It looked like an eye, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching us, just like the man. Night fell, and the atmosphere grew more tense. The lights flickered, the radio turned on by itself, and all we could hear was static mixed with faint, garbled voices. Our phones had no signal, cutting us off from the outside world. We decided to lock ourselves in, barricading the doors and windows with furniture, hoping it would keep the terror outside. But the terror had no intention of staying outside. In the dead of night, loud banging on the windows and door jolted us awake. I looked outside and saw the man standing at the edge of our property, his eyes glowing eerily in the moonlight. My wife saw more figures in the shadows, all staring at the house, unmoving and silent. Desperation and anger boiled over. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, determined to confront the man and end this nightmare. My wife begged me not to go, but I felt I had no choice. The flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the sand. As I approached the man, he slipped behind the dunes once again. Suddenly, I heard my wife scream from the house. Panic surged through me, and I turned to rush back, but I stumbled and fell. As I hit the ground, I realized the sand around me was shifting, as if something was moving beneath it. Hands emerged, grasping at me, pulling me down. I fought them off, heart pounding, and raced back to the house, the sand writhing as if alive. Back inside, we knew we had to leave. We packed up as quickly as we could, throwing our things into the car and driving away into the night. The road seemed longer, the darkness more oppressive. Every shadow felt like it was hiding something sinister, every sound a potential threat. As we drove, I glanced back one last time. There, at the edge of the beach, stood the man, growing smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. He was holding something, a piece of our clothing, perhaps a token of his unending watch. I turned away, focusing on the road ahead, hoping we could leave the horror behind. We drove until the sun began to rise, its light offering a small sense of safety. But the fear lingered. The terror we experienced on that beach wasn't something that could be left behind. It followed us, a shadow in the corner of our minds, a constant reminder of the man on the dunes and his eerie, unblinking stare. The weekend that was supposed to be a peaceful escape turned into a nightmare we couldn't wake from. Even now, the memory of that man and the silent figures haunts us. Every so often, I catch a glimpse of someone watching from a distance, and I wonder if we ever truly escaped the beach, or if the horror simply found a new place to watch from.